What if I told you that one of the most iconic fashion brands of the 20th century wasn't just about sweaters and colors, but murder, scandal, and exploitation? At its peak, Benetton wasn't just a name, it was a global phenomenon, a force that shaped culture and controversy alike. But beneath the vibrant hues and bold ad campaigns lay a story of greed, dark alliances, and catastrophic failures. This isn't just a story of fashion, it's a story of how an empire that dared to challenge the world with its ideals fell victim to its own contradictions. So how does a brand that dressed royalty, broke taboos, and changed advertising forever crumble into irrelevance and disgrace? Let's start where it all began, with the vision of a teenage boy in post-war Italy who wanted to color the world. In the 1950s, Treviso, Italy, was far from a fashion capital. But for 14-year-old Luciano Benetton, it was where a dream was born. After his father's untimely death, Luciano took on the responsibility of supporting his family, working as a sales clerk at a local clothing store. It was there, amidst the dull grays and muted tones of post-war Italy, that he envisioned something radical: clothing that celebrated life with vibrant colors. With the help of his sister Giuliana, who hand-knitted the first sweaters, Luciano began selling his creations door to door. It didn't take long for the bold hues to stand out in a market saturated with drab clothing. By 1965, the siblings officially founded United Colors of Benetton, a name that would soon echo around the world. Their success wasn't just built on bright sweaters, it was built on a revolutionary approach to business. Instead of operating traditional stores, Benetton adopted a franchise model. Local entrepreneurs could open Benetton-branded stores, giving the company a global presence without the overhead of managing every location. By the 1970s, this strategy had propelled the brand across Europe and into major fashion capitals like Paris and New York. But the true genius behind Benetton's rise wasn't just its business model, it was its ability to tap into the zeitgeist. In a time when fashion was dominated by conformity, Benetton dared to be different. Its stores were vibrant spaces where young people could explore, try on clothes, and express themselves, a stark contrast to the stiff, formal shopping experiences of the era. By the late 1970s, Benetton was a household name, synonymous with youthful energy, creativity, and a bold vision of a more colorful world. But as the brand's star rose, so did its ambitions, and its willingness to push boundaries in ways that would later come back to haunt it. Benetton wasn't just making clothes, it was crafting a movement. By the 1980s, the brand had become a global powerhouse, with its vibrant knitwear adorning everyone from college students to royalty. The franchise model was thriving, with thousands of stores opening in over 100 countries. Yet, what truly set Benetton apart was its audacious ability to intertwine fashion with bold social commentary. The driving force behind this cultural shift was Oliviero Toscani, a visionary photographer who transformed Benetton's advertising into something the world had never seen. Forget models in sweaters. Toscani's campaigns tackled racism, war, and the AIDS crisis. A black woman breastfeeding a white baby, a priest kissing a nun. These were not just ads. They were statements designed to provoke and disrupt. Critics were outraged, but the youth of the time adored it. Toscani turned Benetton into more than a brand. It was a symbol of rebellion and social justice. This strategy wasn't just about grabbing headlines. It was about selling a dream. Benetton's clothes became the uniform for a generation that wanted to challenge norms and break boundaries. At the same time, the brand revolutionized its production methods, taking inspiration from Japanese efficiency models, like Kanban. By dyeing finished garments instead of yarn, Benetton could switch colors at the last minute, keeping up with ever-changing trends. Their turnaround time? Just 10 days from order to store, an astonishing feat in an era long before fast fashion as we know it. By the late 1980s, Benetton was everywhere. Princess Diana wore it. Mikhail Gorbachev noticed its ads during a trip to Paris. The company was a cultural juggernaut, a global phenomenon that seemed unstoppable. But beneath the surface of this vibrant empire, cracks were beginning to form. While the brand was breaking boundaries, it was also beginning to overstep them, leaving some to wonder if Benetton's boldness was bravery or hubris. At the heart of this shift was Oliviero Toscani's relentless push to shock the world. In the early 1990s, Benetton released an ad featuring a dying AIDS patient, his frail body surrounded by grieving family members. It was raw, emotional, and deeply unsettling. While some praised the campaign for breaking the silence around AIDS, others accused Benetton of using tragedy to sell sweaters. But Toscani didn't stop there. His next move was even more controversial, a campaign featuring portraits of death row inmates. These weren't abstract discussions of justice. These were convicted murderers, their crimes laid bare, and their faces splashed across billboards. The backlash was immediate. Families of victims called it an insult to their pain, and one grieving daughter's words became infamous. "How does my father's death advertise sweaters?" For the first time, Benetton's provocative ads were not just dividing opinions. They were alienating the very audience that had once celebrated the brand's daring edge. The line between raising awareness and exploiting suffering had been crossed, and the world wasn't impressed. As if the ad campaigns weren't enough, Benetton's business practices were also starting to unravel. In 2013, the Rana Plaza disaster in Bangladesh sent shockwaves through the fashion world. An 8-story factory collapsed, killing over 1,100 workers and injuring thousands more. At first, Benetton denied any involvement. But when labels bearing the company's name were discovered in the wreckage, the truth became impossible to ignore. The public was outraged. How could a brand that once championed social causes turn a blind eye to the exploitation of low-wage workers? Benetton eventually pledged $1.6 million to the victims' compensation fund, but the damage was done. The disaster exposed the grim reality of the fast fashion industry and Benetton's role in it. The Rana Plaza disaster may have been a flashpoint, but it wasn't the only thing dragging Benetton down. By the mid-2000s teens, the brand was losing its grip on the fashion world. Once the trailblazer of bold advertising and vibrant knitwear, Benetton now found itself slipping into irrelevance. The world had moved on, and Benetton couldn't keep up. Fast fashion was taking over. Brands like Zara, H&M, and Uniqlo were revolutionizing the industry, delivering runway-inspired collections at lightning speed and affordable prices. Meanwhile, Benetton's once innovative franchise model was slowing it down. Franchise owners struggled to align with the fast-changing market, and the brand's supply chain couldn't compete with the efficiency of its rivals. What had once been an asset had become a liability. Benetton no longer had a clear place in the market. It wasn't fast enough to compete with Zara and H&M, nor high-end enough to stand out as a luxury label. Instead, it was stuck in a confusing middle ground. Critics began saying that Benetton had become too slow to be fast fashion and too generic to be luxury. For a brand that once led the pack, this was the ultimate insult. Benetton's fall from grace wasn't limited to poor business decisions and lagging sales. As the brand struggled to stay relevant, its name became embroiled in scandals that painted an even darker picture. Scandals that stretched far beyond fashion. The sweeping landscapes of Patagonia, rich with history and natural beauty, became an unexpected battlefield for Benetton. In the early 2000s, the company acquired nearly 900,000 hectares of land in the region, a move that sparked outrage among Argentina's indigenous Mapuche people. This land, they argued, was more than property. It was their ancestral home, stolen during colonial conquests and now exploited for corporate gain. What had once been the land of vibrant sweaters was now, as critics put it, the land of shadowy controversies. Closer to home, another scandal shook the very foundations of the Benetton name. In 2018, the Ponte Morandi Bridge in Genoa, Italy, collapsed, killing 43 people and devastating families across the nation. The bridge was maintained by a company controlled by the Benetton family's holding group. Investigations revealed alarming negligence in its upkeep, sparking national outrage. The tragedy became more than a catastrophic accident. It was a moral reckoning. Italians were furious, accusing the Benetton family of prioritizing profits over lives. Calls to boycott the brand echoed across the country, tarnishing the family's legacy further. The collapse of the Ponte Morandi wasn't just a physical disaster, it was a symbolic one, shattering the public's trust in a name that had once stood for innovation and unity. But the scandals and controversies weren't the only battles Benetton had to face. The company's financial woes and fading relevance had left it reeling, with critics and fans alike wondering if the once iconic brand had anything left to give. Could Benetton reinvent itself yet again? Or was this the beginning of the end? For a brand like Benetton, built on rebellion and reinvention, the idea of giving up was never an option. But by the 2000s and 20s, even the most loyal fans had begun to wonder if the company had anything left to fight for. As the brand faded from relevance, the numbers began to tell the story. In 2023, Benetton reported a staggering €230 million loss. Revenues had been halved over the past decade, and the company's footprint was shrinking fast. The once colorful empire was now a shadow of its former self. Its stores were closing, its customers were leaving, and its leadership was in disarray. The vibrant energy that had once made Benetton a household name had been replaced by uncertainty and desperation. And if the financial crisis wasn't enough, chaos at the top made things worse. In 2017, Luciano Benetton, now in his 80s, returned to try to save the company he had built. But even his presence couldn't stop the decline. By 2024, CEO Massimo Renon was ousted after a disastrous tenure, and Claudio Sforza was brought in. Facing mounting losses, dwindling relevance, and a fractured identity, Benetton launched what many saw as its last-ditch effort to survive. Under CEO Claudio Sforza, the brand announced an ambitious turnaround plan in 2024. The goal? To cut losses by half, close underperforming stores, and simplify its sprawling operations. Over 500 stores were shuttered, and the company doubled down on digital channels, aiming to win back younger customers who now lived online. Sforza's vision wasn't just about cost-cutting. It was about reclaiming Benetton's identity. The company promised to focus on what had once made it great: quality, bold design, and a clear message. Instead of chasing fast fashion trends, Benetton would emphasize timeless pieces with a focus on sustainability, a strategy aimed at appealing to eco-conscious Gen Z consumers. In an ironic twist, the brand also leaned heavily on its past. Classic designs from Benetton's heyday were reintroduced, and the company sought to recapture the charm of its early years by reviving the vibrant colors and bold patterns that had once set it apart. Nostalgia became a central theme, a way to remind consumers of the brand they had fallen in love with decades ago. But the revival wasn't without its skeptics. Many industry insiders questioned whether Benetton's new strategy could compete in a market dominated by fast, cheap, and trendy. Some critics called the plan too little, too late, pointing out that the brand's attempts at reinvention had failed before. Others argued that nostalgia wasn't enough, that Benetton needed to innovate, not just revisit old glories. Still, there were glimmers of hope. Sustainable fashion was becoming more than just a trend, and Benetton's new focus on ethical production resonated with a growing audience of environmentally conscious shoppers. The question remained: could the brand transform those glimmers into a full-blown comeback? As the dust settled on the latest round of store closures and leadership changes, Benetton entered 2025 with cautious optimism. The company's revamped collections, streamlined operations, and renewed focus on sustainability were all steps in the right direction. But the road ahead was far from clear. For a brand that had once defined rebellion and creativity, staying relevant in an unforgiving market was the ultimate challenge. Benetton now stands at a crossroads, clinging to its legacy while fighting to stay relevant in a world that has largely moved on. Its attempts at revival, leaning on nostalgia, embracing sustainability, and restructuring operations offer a glimmer of hope, but the challenges ahead remain daunting. Can this once iconic brand reclaim its former glory, or will it remain a cautionary tale of fashion's unforgiving tides? Only time will tell. What are your thoughts on the journey of Benetton? Let us know in the comments. Thank you for watching. Till next time.